Some sounds of music will come from a famous piano and from a famous guitar. Two lovely musical stories to be told by Billy Taylor and by Eugenia Zuckerman.
20 years ago, Dave Brubeck became convinced that jazz had a place in church worship, and he wrote his first oratorio. Last Friday, when Pope John Paul celebrated Mass in San Francisco, the music of Dave Brubeck was a part of the service. We'll explore the sacred music of this great jazz pianist-composer later on Sunday morning.
On CBS, and here again is Charles Kuralt.
Just what sort of man is Robert Bork? That question, or one very much like it, was asked by Senator, you can see, by Dr. Billy Taylor. Billy? I suppose there is a precedent for jazz musicians writing music designed to be played in churches, isn't there? I can think of a few examples myself.
Oh, sure. Mary Lou Williams wrote a Mass here in New York, Eddie Bonamere and Paul Horn and Lalo Schifrin. There are any number of people who have written Masses. Duke Ellington, in his later days, did nothing but sacred concerts. I've written a couple of things. My most recent album, as a matter of fact, is in religious context, Make a Joyful Noise. So many of us have felt the need to do something along those lines. And, you know, it's really exciting when the Pope comes and you find at one point the Pope was saying, well, I think we've had enough things that are non-traditional in terms of the music of the church. And then he gets here and someone is playing the guitar with his feet.
We saw that, yeah.
and all kinds of things. And it's kind of exciting to see that music is really, jazz especially, is kind of getting the kind of attention that it hasn't gotten before. And with Dave Brubeck coming along and doing a lot of things along these lines, I don't know, kind of, do you know Dave?
No, I don't, but I must say, I've been listening to his music since I was a kid. Dave Brubeck has been playing a long time now, and somehow it's a surprise to me. I guess I still think of Brubeck as the great innovator of that, a completely new sound that surprised us so much in the 50s.
Yeah. Well, he applies all of that, and he really is as serious about that, of course, as he is about any of his music, and he looks at it and says, well, okay, if you really want me to do something like this, or if I really feel the need to do it, then I better apply the same techniques to it. And so when the Pope, and I don't know if the Pope asked him, but when the Catholic people in San Francisco asked him, he said, sure, I'd love to be a part of this, because he's Catholic now.
And the result was?
That he was commissioned to write a special piece to be played in San Francisco at Candlestick Park.
Oh.
Duke Ellington said, every man prays in his own language, and there's no language that God does not understand. Dave Brubeck's language is jazz. He first began to think about using that language in church during World War II.
Actually, the idea of writing religious music came at that time because I wanted to write an oratorio based on Thou Shalt Not Kill. And I thought, well, if I can write something that will bring this home just to me personally and to the listeners that hear it, I would like to do it. So it took me over 20 years to get the nerve to do that. And I finally, in my 40s, wrote The Light in the Wilderness. The center of The Light in the Wilderness, for me, is Christ's statement, love your enemies, do good to those that hate you. And that's right in the middle of that piece. Yeah, no intro. we'll just start. 1, 2, 3.
It was the fame of the Dave Brubeck Quartet that put him on the cover of Time magazine in 1954. During the 50s and 60s, his quartet, with Paul Desmond on sax, Eugene Wright on bass, and Joe Morello on drums, was one of the most successful groups in jazz history. And one of the most successful songs in jazz history came from that group. Paul Desmond's Take 5, with its 5/4 rhythm and its lyrical melody, is one of the important compositions that freed jazz from a conventional beat. And no performance of a Dave Brubeck quartet is complete without it. This quartet has Dave's son, Chris, on electric bass guitar, Randy Jones on drums, and Bill Smith on clarinet. Brubeck is at the piano, where he has been for more than 50 years.
I started playing my first jobs when I was 14 or 15. Then in the Army, I had some wonderful jazz experiences. I unfortunately went overseas as an infantryman, which I got out of that by 2 Red Cross girls asked if there was a piano player in the audience, and we were at a place called Verdun and ready to go right into a battle scene. I immediately held up my hand and volunteered to play piano. Now, that's all that the priest gave me, and he wanted 6 variations.
Brubeck has been composing sacred music for 20 years, based on teachings from both the Old and New Testaments. But he remembers when he needed convincing that it was appropriate to use popular music in church. Now he uses the arguments that won him over.
Weren't you playing that when I came in? How many of you know that's a drinking song? I'll tell them about Bach, the Great B minor Mass. There's 5 repeats of O Sacred Head Now Wounded, which is a German drinking song. Bach did this because he knew Germans drank. In that congregation, they're all going to know that drinking song. So he put a biblical text to it. We all remember it as beautiful. It is beautiful. Beautiful music comes from the people in drinking songs and love songs, but it's absolutely in the tradition of the church to use music from the people.
The Voice of the Holy Spirit is Dave Brubeck's latest major composition. It celebrates Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit appeared to the apostles. The music is equally at home in a concert hall or in a church. Brubeck has written 10 sacred compositions, but the Mass he wrote several years ago appears to have had the deepest impact on him personally. After completing that work, he joined the Catholic Church.
I became so involved with the Mass that it was almost like a calling that I didn't understand to join this church. My family doesn't understand it, and I can't explain it much more than that. But the Mass was such an experience for me.
His family includes 6 children and his wife, Iola. They've been married for 45 years and make their home in Connecticut. It was here that Brubeck spent the summer, working on a special request that was a special honor: music for the Mass that Pope John Paul was going to celebrate in San Francisco.
Yeah. The reading that day that they wanted was, "Upon this rock I will build my church." So
Last Friday, Dave Brubeck's Sacred Music reached his largest audience ever in Candlestick Park in San Francisco.